Chapter 32. Some things don't change. The dusty road, weaving like a vine through the market, was bustling with patrons as it always was, and Anselm scurried off to the side any time a wagon rushed by to avoid getting dirt on his newly washed robes. It had been 11 years since he had run through the streets as a youth. Back then he was just a boy playing with wooden swords and following his sister on adventures. Back then he would get into trouble for being too rough indoors or having quarrels with neighboring boys. Now he returned, approaching his 30th year and wearing the elegant robes of a royal warden. He held his head high and tried to stifle a smile. He hadn't considered what it would be like to return, but now he felt an unexpected excitement come over him. His head bobbed back and forth as he shouldered his way through the crowds of the market, and he unwittingly attempted to glance at every person who passed him by. He expected at any moment to see someone he knew or be recognized by someone from long ago, but all of them were buried in conversation or were busy bartering and did not look up. Anselm never thought it could be, but coming home felt nice. He laughed at the ridiculous thought. Ever since they had arrived in Paladar a few days ago, they all had had a well-earned chance to rest and, with fate's luck, were being accommodated at the castle as honored guests. He, Alastra, and Caleb had been busy in council with King Brackmore, Olam, and other war officers, recounting every detail of the happenings at Tritus, their journey thereafter to Shorewell, and finally to Paladar. The latter part they changed, modifying the chronology to accommodate for leaving Leothran's identity and abilities a secret. That, they had all agreed, would be best left for a more appropriate setting, if the need came at all. Leothran, Alastra, and Layla had spent much of their time in the castle, content to stay comfortable. Alastra had every reason to visit the city, but showed a clear desire not to. The queen gave them colorful silk dresses and jewelry as gifts for their services to the kingdom. Layla, of course, loved hers and wore it daily. It put him, and especially Caleb, at ease to see her so carefree and safe again. Leothran had accepted the gift graciously and wore it the first day also, but obviously felt awkward wearing it. Alastra wore her dress long enough to show she was grateful for it, but was back in her warden robe soon after. She took a liking to the jewelry, however, and her fingers, neck, and ears glittered more than ever after she donned them all. Ansel, a voice came. He realized he had been unconsciously staring down into a deep basket of dinberries from Celosia. He looked around, before finding the voice was coming from underneath the shade of the roof of the berry stand. A woman with a wide smile, a little older than he, came around the stand and hugged him. Ansel Flitchett. Is that truly you? He was taken off guard, and had to study her face for a moment. Rhea. Yes, the woman laughed. Ansel, I can't believe it's you. Fate smite me. What on earth are you doing here? Oh, just thought I would come back and see if anything had changed, Anselm stuttered, not sure what information he should withhold. Wow, look at you. Why, you've changed, Rhea said, clapping her hands on her sides. And you as well, Anselm said. You look a lot different than when we used to catch frogs at the river with Elle. She laughed again. Time changes many things. And so does having 4 children and working in the sun every day. Anselm shook his head and whistled. You have been busy, he said. Rhea was looking him up and down. Those clothes. Ansel, are you a warden? She took his hands and gaped at the scars in his palms. Elle and I both, he responded proudly. We have been in Avondale all these years training in the city of Tritus. Elle is a sage serving under High Sage Fridmorton. It was Rhea's turn to be shocked. She leaned back against her berry stand and took it all in. Her smile faded only now. The two of you just up and vanished one day. Well, there could have been happier times for a visit. War is coming. Haven't you heard? There's no official word from the king yet, but there will be. Invaders from the east are coming, they say. Everyone is in a panic. Yes, I've heard, Anselm said glumly. I was hoping I could help. He rubbed the scars in his palms. Of course, if it comes to that, Rhea said. Or you could always help me write orders up here, she laughed. They taught you to read and write in Tritus, no? Anselm smiled sheepishly. They tried. Rhea chuckled again. Are you going to see your folks? Anselm shrugged. So they're still in business, are they? No. Not anymore, Rhea replied. Closed shop a few years back, but they haven't moved anywhere. Same old house. Anselm's face was blank as he stared down the market road toward the Flitchett store. They're out of business, he mumbled. Rhea watched him daze a moment and patted him on the arm. She moved back to her spot behind the berry stand and wrapped a handful of them in dried paper. Here. Welcome back, she said. You should go see them. At length Anselm nodded and looked down at the paper wrapping. Dinberries? These are expensive. Rhea smiled and nodded. With all the chaos in Grimhall, I'm surprised they are still being exported at all. Take them. Anselm walked more slowly the rest of the way through the market until he reached the end of the lane where the road forked into 3 narrow paths. He took the leftmost one that led past the old brick bakery and the toy painter, around the bend and up the stairs to home. His eyes no longer searched for familiar faces or looked into windows of old shops he remembered. He watched the dirt pass under his feet with the bag of dinberries hanging down by his side. So the shop is out of business. I wonder what happened. When we left, they couldn't keep up with orders. But then again, I was just a child. What did I know? He made his way slowly up the old cracking stairs that led to his street. His heart pounded for no reason. He had not seen home for so long, had not seen his parents for so long. Would it be different? Would they be happy to see him? As he reached the top of the stairs, he looked back at the glimmering glass face of the castle pinnacle and wondered if it would be better to abandon the cause. He turned back and collided with a woman, nearly pushing her over. Elle? He said, as his sister's surprise melted into annoyance when she realized it was him. What are you doing here? Anselm asked. She sighed and shook her head, as if she were ashamed of being caught in a disgraceful act. The same thing you are, no doubt, she said. She looked ahead of her again at their old home. It used to double as their parents' shop, and lay quiet in the shade on the side of the empty street. Actually, I don't really know why I'm here, Anselm confessed. That's exactly my point, Elastra said. They both stared at the house glumly until Anselm broke the silence. It looks older than I remember. Smaller too. I heard at the market that they closed shop a few years ago. The 2-story house was indeed old, and the faded paint on the front was wearing away from the assault of the sun's beatings year after year. The windows were not clean, and some clutter of metal scraps and wood laid beside the steps to the front door, garnished with weeds well overdue for uprooting. Above the door hung an old sign wrapped in a sheet. Underneath, Anselm knew it read, Flitchett Cobbling and Repair. It seems they have, Elastra said. How long have you been standing here, anyway? Anselm asked, looking around to see if there was some visibly apparent reason nearby. Since this morning, she answered. I haven't seen Mother or Father come in or out. I wonder if they are home. Well, there's only one way to find out, isn't there? Anselm said. And we should probably warn them about the coming war. That things are soon to get dangerous. Both Elastra and Anselm agreed, accepting the reason as a pretext to turn their visit into an obligatory chore. He was glad his sister had been there, and as they slowly walked together toward the house, he felt transported back to old times. For a moment his sister seemed like just his sister, not the sage and rival of more recent years. They stopped at the door wondering if they should knock, but decided to just walk in. They entered to see the familiar wide room that made up the entire bottom level of the house, and once their cobble shop. By the light filtering through the dirty window glass, they could see how drastically the place had changed. All of the large tables that once filled the room were gone. Patches of darker-colored wood on the floor attested to their past existence. The walls were still lined with the enormous shelving, and old shoe lasts of various sizes filled the space alongside hammers, boxes of thread and beeswax. On the far wall, several hides were stretched and drying, and the whole place still smelt strongly of leather. Brighter light seeped down the old staircase that led up to the living quarters. They slowly walked into the room and roamed about, taking in all of the memories of home, stopping to inspect a trinket here and there, both familiar and new. It was not long before heavy footsteps sounded at the stairs, and they heard their father's voice booming. "Who's there?" he said, the sound stopping halfway down the stairs so that he was still hidden from view. "Orders won't be ready for another few days. I've got a lot to do, so be gone." Anselm and Elastra looked at each other and shrugged. "Father?" Anselm said. He walked to the stairs and peered up. His father had already turned to head back up, and the light coming from upstairs reduced his figure to a dark shape. But it was his father all right, short, thick, and slightly overweight, with long hair running off his head. Elastra stepped up behind her brother and looked up as well. Their father turned to face them completely, but never moved from his position in the middle of the stairs. Anselm did not like the silence and spoke up first. "It's been a very long time, Father," he said. He wanted to say that it was good to see him, but knew it was not true. Another silence ensued, and then his father turned and walked back up the stairs. "Come up if you like," he said without turning. He could hear the murmur of his mother's voice inquiring after the visitors. Anselm and Elastra followed him up, entering the main room of their home. Unlike the shop space, not much had changed. The same rugs on the floor. The same decorations and chairs. Anselm's mother was sitting in a rocker in the corner, and stood up in surprise when they emerged from the staircase. His father made his way to the table in the corner, and sat on its edge. Both of them looked taken by surprise, but not necessarily happy. "It has been a long time," their father said. His face was void of expression, and in the candle-lit room Anselm could see many more years stacked upon his wrinkled face. His mother looked older too, with baggy eyes and hair gone grey. "You two have grown," she added. She looked perhaps a degree more enthusiastic, but more sad than anything. "And you two look the same," Elastra lied with a strained smile. "Have you been well?" Anselm's father chuckled, but it was not a friendly laugh. He shook his head and folded his arms across his chest. "Well enough to stay alive, I suppose," he said. "We couldn't hire enough hands to keep up with production, and were eventually forced to close shop. Now I am cutting wood. Your mother is making blankets and stockings." Anselm could feel his father's words attacking them. It had not yet been voiced, but he already knew where the conversation would go. It was just as he had feared. A reprimanding, as if they were still children. His father went on. "You two just up and disappeared one day. You wasted no time, seeing as we could find no trace of you. We were never sure if you were alive or dead in a ghoul's den somewhere." "Of course we were alive," Elastra said with defensive haughtiness. "One day a troupe of bards and performers came through town, and we saw a chance to escape and find our own paths. We went to Tritus and took the pack to train with their wardens." "Wardens?" their father said. "So that's what those robes are. You ran away to make pacts with spirits and sell your minds away." His tone was nothing but insulting. Over the years, Anselm had developed a passive-aggressive way of countering such conversation, and he was surprised to feel how easy it was to revert to it. He could now see the emptiness of his father's threatening demeanor, and in an odd way it made him sad. "That's right, Father. We have taken the pact, and are both powerful and high-regarded wardens. Elastra has even attained the title of sage. We have spent many years in defense of Avondale under King Hallis." "Indeed," was all his father said in response. He turned to the table to pour himself a glass of ale. Anselm finally took a nearby chair, and dropped his bag of dinberries on the floor beside him while Elastra leaned against the wall. Their mother was staring blankly at their robes, and particularly Elastra's, which was unfastened low, like always. Her eyes moved up and down, gazing at the wide array of jewelry dangling about her. "So what do two great wardens of Tritus want with a poor old couple of peasants?" their father asked. "Surely not money," Mother said, speaking up again. "We don't have any anyhow." "Do we have to have a reason to come?" Elastra asked sharply. "Our roads have brought us back to Paladar, and we wanted to come see how you were faring." "I knew we should have just stayed away," she muttered to Anselm. "And just what would you have wanted us to say?" their father said, swirling back to face them and spilling ale over the rim of his cup. "You ran away and dropped all of your responsibilities when your mother and I were counting on you to keep our business afloat. You thought the two of us could manage alone. We lost our livelihood because of you two and your fantasies. Anselm felt a defensive fire build as his sister was hammered by their father's words. It was a strange sensation made up of the memory of being helpless and afraid under his wrath day after day, and the new confidence and strength he had attained from so many years of independence. His feelings to help his sister prevailed. "We left because the two of you never gave a damn about anything but your business," he shouted. "We were young, father. We were children. Hammering leather and stitching with boar bristles for 12 hours a day would make any child want to run. We left because we knew neither of you would care." "We cared," their mother said. Her tone sounded hollow and forced. "Did you?" asked Elastra. She looked at the both of them as they sat silently scowling. "You knew where we had gone, didn't you? You found out." Their father took another gulp from his cup in reply. "You did," she concluded. "And you never came after us." "We couldn't leave the business," their father said. "Gold and trade never sleep." Elastra chuckled. "Yet parents who have lost their children do." Father slammed his cup onto the table and stood up suddenly. "How dare you barge back into my house and insult me, girl?" Elastra's casual lean against the wall was gone, and their mother looked tense, glaring from her rocker where she had sat again. Anselm was jarringly thrown yet again into the past, watching a scene he had witnessed many times before. It was not right. As children, all they could do was cower, but now it was clear. He could see it all clearly now with the objective eyes of a warden. His mother and father had some valid reasons to be cross with what they had done so long ago, but this was unacceptable. No one talked to his sister like this while he was present. Not to sage Elastra. Even as he came to a resolution, their father stalked toward Elastra with a red face seething in anger. Anselm jumped from his chair and stood between them, his hands bursting with a radiant light. Mother yelped and father stopped dead in his tracks with a look of shock upon his face. It was only a first-degree lighting hex. A harmless illumination, but it had achieved the effect he desired. "When your children left 11 years ago, they vanished forever," Anselm said, as the light danced furiously around the room. "They are gone, and before you now stand Sage Elastra Flitchett and Captain Anselm Flitchett of King Haller's forces." His father had retreated backwards to lean on the table again, while he shielded his eyes. Anselm moved his hands out of the hex formation, and the light that filled the room disappeared, leaving behind only a profound silence. Their parents looked on without a word. Elastra came beside Anselm, and they looked at one another with a new understanding. A stronger bond. Anselm scooped the bag of dinberries up from the floor. "Come, El. We're wasting our time here." He walked to the top of the staircase that would lead them back downstairs and stopped. Nearly 2 weeks ago, Tritus was attacked by invaders from Talgarth, and now they marched to Paladar. "We came to warn the king." "I've heard the rumors," their father grunted, unremorseful as ever. He finished his drink and tossed the tin cup to the floor. "Talgarth this and Talgarth that these days." Elastra followed her brother. He had already begun descending the stairs. "It's not a rumor," she said before she left them. "It's true. And I suggest you get all of your precious gold in a safe place in case they breach the wall and enter the city. Meanwhile we will be fighting." Anselm stood on the stairs to listen to her last words. When nothing was said in response, they left the house together in silence. Out in the noonday light of the street they stood for a moment in thought, glancing back to the old house that now looked as menacing as a mouse. Finally they walked side by side back toward the castle. "I'm a fool to think things would have been any different," Elastra said, sounding profoundly disappointed. "This, brother, is how I can draw upon high-degree hexes without a concern. Some memories aren't worth keeping." "But they make us who we are now," Anselm responded, pondering. "Things are different," he added after considering her statement further. "They haven't changed one bit. But we have. We stand on our own now, and whatever they do with their lives is their concern, not ours. We have a duty to fulfill." They walked back through the twisting roads and entered the marketplace again. "Thank you for being there, Ansel," Elastra said. He could not remember the last time she had thanked him for anything, if ever. It was rare when her hard defensive barrier was thinned and her true feelings shone through. He nodded. Only fate knows why the two of us were put together. I curse the day that decision was made, but it will always be that way. We can always turn to each other, right? Elastra smiled and took the bag of dinberries, opened them and tossed a handful into her mouth. For reasons Anselm could not explain, his words of comfort only brought more concern to his heart. Perhaps it was the coming peril weighing upon it. Perhaps.
Thank you for listening. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Episodes go live every Monday and Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The audiobook can be purchased in its entirety on Google Play Books. Get the whole trilogy now in both paperback and ebook formats. All links are in the description.